join me up on the stage and I will introduce them. These are a group of people who are doing extraordinary things, using new technologies to improve the workings of our democracies, to improve the relationships between governments and citizens. And they have tools at their disposal, tools that they are innovating, which, having just spoken to them behind stage for a while, I think you'll all be fascinated to hear about. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then ask each of them to tell us a story and an example of what it is that they're doing, and then we'll carry on with our discussion. Jennifer Palker is the founder of Code for America. She's Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the United States. Jorge Soto is the founder of Data4 and Director of Civic Innovation in the Office of the President of Mexico. January Makamba is Tanzania's Deputy Minister of Science, Communications and Technology and a member of the Tanzanian Parliament. Swati Ramanathan is the co-founder of Janagraha, and Belabes Benkreda is the founder of Munathara Initiative. And I apologize in advance for messing up any names that I did. Let me start with this idea of how we can get governments to reach out to civilians more effectively. Governments often tend to be traditional and risk-averse institutions. So what can we do to get them to engage with new technologies, often which they don't understand, to make their citizens more involved? Jen, I'm going to start with you. Before you became Deputy CTO at the White House, you founded something that you called Peace Corps for Geeks. You don't look like a geek. Code for America. And for those of you who don't know what it is, Code for America places innovative teams of IT talent within city governments in order to help them engage with citizens in more friendly ways and help solve public relations problems that are going on in those cities. Jen, start with telling us a little bit about, you were telling me earlier about it, the work that you have done in a place, for example, like in Philadelphia, where you have used specific new technologies to make government work more effectively.
Right. So we work with city governments. We did a great project in Philadelphia where we asked citizens to text in their ideas for the general plan, the 2035 plan. I was thinking, though, in terms of getting government to engage differently with citizens, about a project that we did in New Orleans in our second year. Actually, it was the same year that the Philadelphia project took place. They had a real problem there around blighted properties. As many of you know, Hurricane Katrina exacerbated a situation with a number of blighted properties. And of course, you're trying to fix these properties, but in the meantime, the citizens are advocating for certain properties to be demolished or to be taken care of in different ways. And the problem that the city government had is that they have information about the people who've called in about properties, reports, inspections. They have information about the hearings that are going to happen. All of these different bits of information are held in different spreadsheets or ledgers or databases around city government. So at no point could you stand in front of a property in New Orleans and know the status of that blighted property, what the city was actually doing about it. And you had these citizens who on their own time were putting together that information. They could advocate for what they wanted to have happen in their neighborhood, but it was an incredibly laborious process. And every month you would have these people show up at these blight status meetings where they would talk about various properties in the city that needed to be dealt with. And they were very contentious meetings. I always described them as sort of defensive city government and an angry and frustrated populace. We had these fellows go down there. They thought that this was probably a 3-year, $30 million IT project. These 20-something-year-old developers came down there, developers and data people and designers, went down there, 4 of them, for a couple of months. And they took all that data and put it together in a lovely, beautiful interface, and they offered it to the citizens. And the first time they rolled it out at this blight status meeting, and everyone could be on the same page about what was going on with these blighted properties, what they told us was that it changed the conversation. You didn't have this contention anymore. You actually had the citizens in the city working together to try to figure out what to do about the properties. And I think the story there really is that I don't think public servants want to be shouted out. I don't think they want to be always on the defensive. They really do want to work with citizens. And if you give them those tools and you can literally put citizens and city on the same page using technology, you can change that conversation.
Jorge, you have done something similar to Jen. You've had a similar career path, working in startups with using data provided by government. You were then tapped, you were living in California, and you were tapped by the new government of Mexico, President Peña Nieto, to come down and do something similar to Jen, but on a national scale. What are you doing and how are you doing it?
Well, as you said, my career has been as an entrepreneur, as an activist, and now working for the government. And in all these several stages, I've been learning a lot. How can we interact with citizens, and also how can we regain trust from the government? One example that we worked in a long time ago, a couple of years ago, it was in the north of Mexico. I believe that technology is shaped by society, but also the use of technology is defined by the context of how this society lives. And as you know, in Mexico, we are living in a lot of security problems. So in the north of Mexico, people are using Twitter to connect with each other, and they are trusting each other much better than traditional media outlets or the government. So they're using particular hashtags to alert about disasters, about gunfights, about what's going on in the city.
So they're not using texting.
We're not using texting because we understood that texting in Mexico, it's a little bit more expensive than in other countries. But Twitter, my parents, they are 65-year-olds, and they're creating their Twitter accounts because they know that searching for a particular hashtag, they will be able to know if they can go to the movies or go out of the movies back home. So
whether there's some security problem in the street outside.
Whether there's a gunfight or something. So we created this thing called the Center for Citizen Integration. That what it does is it's an institution, a non-profit institution that validates all those reports on Twitter, or that conversation on Twitter, and forwards it to the government, to the official institutions to try to tackle and to solve the problems. So far, in a year and a half, we have received and validated around 65,000 reports, and this is just particularly in the northeast of Mexico. But other kind of projects, for example, this is with the citizens, but the geeks, I'm definitely a geek. So with the geeks, there was in March this year, the Mexican Congress, it was leaked that they approved a contract, a $10 million contract to develop an iPhone app. And it's a bit expensive if you know about technology. And so what we did, instead of just angry tweeting about what's going on, we decided to talk to all the civic hacker community and tell them, is someone willing to do this same app for $1,000 and an iPad? And we received 175,000 responses of the civic hackers, and 5 apps that were completed in open source code in 5 days, in a week. And we went to the Congress to present the five apps, and all the congressmen were there, and after the geeks we presented their app, the leader of the Congress, he took the stage and he said, you know what? After seeing what these guys have done in a week with $1,000, I believe that the contract was a little bit expensive. So we're gonna cancel it.
I'm sure the people who had the contract loved you.
Yeah. Well, and then the president hired me. So yeah. Now I'm working for the government, and I know that governments, mainly in Latin America, they can be corrupted or inefficient. But also the best governments have helped their citizens to live richer and safer and healthier lives, and build on that capabilities.
What I think is interesting about all of the people up on this stage, they all come from different areas of the world, and they are all using technology in slightly different ways, in the ways that suit the citizens and the culture of their country. Minister Makemba, you are Deputy Minister for Science Communications. You're also an elected official, and you've done something in Tanzania that is totally new, reaching out to your citizens, not by Twitter, and to your electorate by taking cell phone numbers from people and actually SMSing and texting them.
Yes, when I was running for Parliament, one of the issues that people mentioned as a problem is that they elect leaders, the MPs, and immediately they become inaccessible.
People might say that here too.
So what I learned is that people use SMSs a lot in their daily interactions. And as part of my campaign strategy, I was collecting the phone numbers so that I can SMS people, come vote for me. So it became easier and became no-brainer. When I was elected, I set up a platform, a system with a special number in which people can reach me at any time of the day if there's any issue. After this dinner, I'll go and log into a system which I have and read messages that has been sent over the past 12 hours, the last time I checked.
How many do you expect there would be during the course of an education?
Probably 40.
And you will reply to each of them?
Yes, or I forward them to particular people who are concerned. Let's say I'll find a message where a bridge has been swept away by rain, and we have a district engineer. So I would forward that message or call. And sometimes these messages are real time, that there's a particular problem, there's a fire in the village, and people are frantically sending messages. And obviously, I can't do anything with that fire. But what I do is I call people who are on the scene, and they put me on loudspeaker. So sometimes people, they know that you can't do something at that particular time. But the show of concern, care, accessibility helps them to feel empowered, that they can access their leader, and their leader is listening, and is probably going to do something about it. So it has proved quite useful for me because
And useful presumably for the citizens, and well, useful for you politically, but useful for the citizens to feel they have somebody who they can actually not call, but text to get a response.
Absolutely, and some messages that can be very nasty as well. Look, what are you doing? We don't see, anything since you got elected, and you try to educate and explain, what you've been trying to do. So it has been quite useful.
Now, I'm right, aren't I, in thinking, January, that you're texting in Swahili or in English?
Yes, in Swahili. That's the common language.
And it's just one language?
One language. That's the unique feature of Tanzania, where we have a language that is used by all, irrespective of whether or not you've gone to school. It's not a colonial language.
Okay, which leads me to Swati Ramanathan, who has come to us, flown in this evening for us from India. Swati, thank you very much for joining us and for flying such a long way. You were mentioning earlier, and again, this is the issue of different cultures and different countries having different languages, but again, trying to use technology to get to people, because you are dealing with multiple languages. So the option that is available to January is not an option that is available to you.
Yes, that's right. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Janagraha and my online team, which is extraordinary. But let me give you an example of some of the data stuff that we deal with. In government, I was talking to Ellen Miller earlier, and she was talking about how data, when it's placed, has to be placed fully. And I was thinking, about the line, in God you trust, everybody else, bring data to the table. And our governments wouldn't be able to fulfill that, because in India, one of the biggest challenges is that where's the data? It's not that government doesn't want to give it to us. I'm sure it would come to that when they had it, but they themselves don't have it. So one of the online properties that we have, and first to answer to your question, yes, one of the biggest struggles that we have is the penetration of internet and the literacy levels, that not everybody is literate, and the multiplicity of languages that we have. So these are restrictions that we have. However, having said that, the scale and the size of our population, folks, we are about 150 million that have internet penetration. So that's a very small percentage. But the mobile telephony is 700 million people. The size of the population in our country is 1.2 billion people. And our urban population is about 31% at this point, where we're transitioning. The largest amounts of corruption that takes place is, both in rural and in urban, but urban especially is for not the big ticket ones, what we call wholesale corruption, but the smaller things that impact our day-to-day life and interactions with government services such as driver's licenses, birth and death certificates, passports. Every one of these is ridden with an instance of graft. Money has to exchange hands. But we weren't even able to scope the size of this kind of problem. And so iPaidAbribe.com was the first, largest repository of bribe instances on this retail corruption in the country.
Describe how ipaidabribe.com actually works.
So ipaidabribe.com is the first time it works as a confessional, because I'm so irritated that I had this indignity of having been forced to pay a bribe. And it's great that I have a site. So it's non-moralistic. It doesn't, say that, oh, you bad person, you've paid a bribe or any of that. But at least you come and report it. And if you look at the instances of reports that have come in, 22,000, Katty, 22,000 bribe instances that have been reported. And
over the
total amount is $10 million. In dollar terms, it's USD 10 million. That works out to $450 per bribe. And if you look at the urban population, just per household, if you take conservative estimates and say each household per annum pays one bribe, that works out on an annual basis on just petty corruption of $3 billion. I mean, and this is, and there's no data on this. So this has become a great way of doing this. What we have done is we've started introducing the ability for people who are reporting to say, I want you to send the bribe, this story of mine to the concerned department, the concerned citizen. And what has happened is 40% of them are actually saying yes. This is a higher bar of courage that is required out of citizens, because now you can no longer be anonymous. You have to give your personal data, because now there's investigation that's followed up. But look at what happens in a country where there is such a deficit of trust. When government responds with concrete action, with measurable action, the surge of hope that comes in is incredible. It's extraordinary. So we have something called the Unique Identification Code, which has started. There's an authority which has started in India. We had a report where the gentleman said, I had to pay a bribe for my father and me to get this thing. We sent this report, and he said, please share this with the concerned authority. Within 40 years, the UIDA, the authority of there, actually blacklisted the operator and then is following up with criminal proceedings. Now, the euphoria that comes in and the hope that comes in when people see their governments responding is extraordinary. And progressive departments with progressive cities, when they start doing this, that's when it's like rainwater harvesting. Hope kind of actually begins to work. And technology, without technology, we couldn't have done this. So,
Swati, thank you. A great story. Belabes, we were hearing from Ambassador Power earlier about the transition problems in the Middle East. This is the area of the world that you are working in, and you have developed a debate platform to get young people in the Middle East, the very people who were leading the call for change a couple of years ago, to talk about things that they find difficult, to get women to talk, to get young people to give alternative perspectives. How are you doing that?
Well, we're a completely open debate platform. Anybody can take part by uploading a video of up to 99 seconds on our platform. And then we have an online sort of crowdsourcing process where the broader public gets to vote on these contributions. And the winners of these online debates are invited to take part on an equal footing on primetime television debates with either elected leaders or other opinion leaders, like academics and journalists and so on. But I think the best way to illustrate this is to use an example relevant to the United States. Imagine you had a debate about an issue of major contention in this country. President Ilves mentioned earlier gun control, but instead of the usual opinion leaders and policymakers like, let's say, Nancy Pelosi and Rand Paul, they would be joined by perfectly unknown youth from America, a girl from Kansas of 20 years and a boy from Alabama of 22 years. And they've been voted to get there by the American people through an online platform. So can you imagine what this would do to the perception not only of the youth who are participating, but also their peers who are watching them on television? Now imagine that we're doing this in the Arab world, where opinion leaders are almost invariably men between the ages of 50 and 80, where the women and youth of the region are tragically excluded from the public sphere. So this is obviously very inspiring, and we've seen some great examples of youth who are so articulate and came out as sort of like the stars of these debates and went on to do great things.
And we saw so many young people involved in the leadership, really, of the Arab Spring. They were the people who we saw brought out onto the streets of Tunisia, where you operate from, through social media. is it the same people that are now talking in these open debates, and what are they asking for, and how are their messages being received by those older people who are in leadership?
Surprise. I mean, people are surprised when they actually see for the first time in their lives youth debate on television. They're very surprised. And I think, again, this is very important. It was youth who drove the change a couple of years ago, and yet they're being tragically left out of the conversation about the future of their countries these days. So the importance of the youth participation and marginalized communities and women, those groups who are so underrepresented, cannot be overstated.
But what the skill with which they use social media to drive those revolutions, why is that same use of social media not happening now to get the kind of involvement in the government process that you're trying to initiate?
It is happening, but there is intense polarization, and social media is actually being used to foster that polarization because it offers opportunities to customize your own public sphere. You follow the people you agree with, you read the articles that you know you're going to like. That is a problem. So it really is also, aside from the fact that technology can help us foster more participation, it's also about a culture of seeing the opportunity in opposing views and engaging with those that you disagree with as an opportunity for new ideas to thrive and opportunities for the national discourse to develop and evolve.
We have a few more minutes, and I want to ask each of you one question briefly, which is, you have an audience here of several hundred people who are committed to the idea of democracy around the world and the promotion of the idea of democracy around the world. Let me start with you, Jen. If you could ask them to do one thing tomorrow morning when they get back slightly bleary-eyed to their desks, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think for us it would be to promote the notion that we can be involved not just at the political level, but at the governmental and the bureaucratic level, and to push that out to young people. I think they've been invited into the political discourse. They know that they can help change the conversation and get people elected. They also need to know that when it comes to the day-to-day of governing, they have a role there too.
Jorge?
I would say, well, first of all, trust the geeks, and second of all,
yes.
And second of all, I think institutions cannot be imposed from the top. I think institutions are built from the bottom up, one interaction at a time.
January.
I think that it's important to champion the idea of universal coverage of mobile access.
Let's just quickly, you bring up a very good point, and I meant to bring it up earlier. In each of your countries, what is the percentage rate of mobile coverage? January, you have the floor. What is it?
About 60%.
60%
yes.
in
Penetration,
Tanzania.
yeah.
Penetration. Jorge, in Mexico?
Mobile is around 80%, and internet is around 40%.
Jen, you have had some surprising figures. You mentioned to me Philadelphia earlier.
Yeah, I mean, in Philadelphia, I think 60% of households have broadband access, and
60% in Philadelphia.
Yeah, we have many of the same problems.
Surprisingly low.
And it's a higher number for mobile phones, but it's a low number for smartphones in Philadelphia, and so we need to reach people through text messaging.
Swati, in India?
I'm going to give you the numbers because I keep wanting to stagger you with the numbers, you know, the size of the population. It's 150 with access, 150 million with the access to internet, and 700 million with access to mobile telephony.
Which as a percentage is what of India's population?
The total population of India is 1.2 billion people.
So you're looking at about 70%.
You're looking
access.
at about less than 10% on internet, about
Right.
10%
But
on
in terms
internet.
of mobile access,
and mobile
very high.
is approximately between 65 to 70%.
And Belabes, I'm assuming in the Middle East that mobile access is very high.
But it really depends. You know, we work across the entire Arab world, and we have countries where it's in the lower 10s and all the way up to the mid 70s in some of the Arabian Gulf countries. So it's really diverse. I know Algeria, for example, last figure I read was 16%, which is really quite tragic for a country of almost 40 million people, which is where my parents are from. But again, it goes like in places like Qatar, it can go, I think, in the early 70s to mid 70s.
January, forgive me, it is Christmas and it is your wish that you'd like to ask from these people, so that one thing that they could do or understand for your initiative.
Yeah, precisely. That access to mobile is such empowering in some of our countries because it includes financial inclusion. People use a mobile phone to transfer money, but also democratic inclusion as well. So we should not let this thing to be of business. All of us can work together and think through how can we make some of our country attain universal coverage. And also it's important to understand that democracy and legitimacy of leaders who are elected will always be contested. And public debates in some of our countries sometimes take a form of an election campaign, and it's futile for a political leader to say that the election is over, I've won, so there should not be a debate on a particular public policy. That will continue to happen, and we should get used to it, and that people who are better equipped to use some of these tools will continue to win debates in public policy.
Swati, you have a Christmas wish.
Well, I would ask Jack to actually help us innovate on, specifically him, on a financial inclusion, because we're running the largest urban microfinance institution, which we hope will become a bank pretty soon. But it actually addresses the problems of 2 million already, and we have 100 branches across the country. But I think the technology is going to be a game changer in how financial inclusion takes place. And I'd love for innovation and helping us think through prepaid cards, mobile, all of that. So,
Belabes.
Well, our initiative is really based on the idea of collaborating with as many people as possible on working towards new ideas. So I would encourage everybody to go to our website, look at some of the programs we're running. There are many ways of supporting us, and we'd love to enter the conversation with everybody.
Jen Palka, Jorge Soto, Janir Makamba, Swati Ramanathan, Belabes Benkreda, thank you all very much for joining me up here. Thank you.